Honourable members, Commissioner, the European Union remains strongly committed to peace, security and stability in the Middle East region. In this regard, we welcome the recent stop of hostilities between Israel and Iran. Both sides must respect international law and refrain from actions that could escalate into broader regional destabilisation. The European Union's view on Iran's nuclear program is clear. Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon and must comply with its obligations under the non-proliferation treaty. That is why we find it very worrying that the Iranian government has decided to suspend cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Such cooperation should be resumed without delay. We have also said it clearly that a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue can only be achieved through negotiations. The European Union stands therefore ready to continue to contribute to all diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalating current tensions. In Gaza, the situation has not improved. The European Council called again for an immediate ceasefire and the unconditional release of all hostages, leading to a permanent end to hostilities. Heads of state and government called once more on Israel to fully comply with its obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, in ensuring that humanitarian aid reaches all those in need at scale. The European Union is fully committed to a lasting and sustainable peace, based on the two-state solution. We are ready to contribute to all efforts towards this solution and call on all parties to refrain from actions that undermine its viability. We keep the engagement on the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the questions of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution, and we look forward for its organisation as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your attention.
Siamo in attesa.
We're waiting for the Commissioner. Commissioner Roosevelt hasn't joined us yet. We're obliged to wait for the Commissioner to arrive. No, Commissioner Roosevelt is being replaced by a colleague, Mr. Hoekstra.
Chair, indeed, it is not yet Commissioner Roosevelt, but she's on her way, and reminds me of the fairy tale where you're constantly waiting for someone to arrive, but that at some point she will arrive, I promise you. Until she's there, you, ladies and gentlemen, you have to do it with me. And I'm going to speak of her behalf, and she was actually planning to speak on the behalf of Kaja Kallas, who then, of course, speaks on behalf of the Commission. President, honourable members of the European Parliament, during the last plenary session, we discussed the developments in the Middle East following the escalation between Israel and Iran and the military operation on the Iranian nuclear site. And we've all seen that since then there has been, if I may call it that, a fragile ceasefire. The European Union has always been clear and unequivocal in its position when it comes to Iran. Let's have no illusions, and let's make clear that Iran can never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. Let me stress that. Can never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. And in our view, therefore, the sustainable solution is built through diplomacy. Our High Representative, Kaja Kallas, clearly stated the EU's position in her discussion with the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and she committed once again the commitment to dialogue for a peaceful solution. And it is, ladies and gentlemen, in this context that we're deeply concerned by the approval of the law suspending cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency and the direct attacks, because it's nothing less than that, the direct attacks against the agency and against the Director General, Mr. Grossi in particular. Let me therefore state clearly once again our full support to the International Atomic Energy Agency and Director General Grossi in what we view as an absolutely essential task of continuing to monitor Iran's nuclear program in a professional and impartial manner, because that is exactly what he and his team have been doing before. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons remains the cornerstone, in our view, of the global non-proliferation regime. And Iran, particularly because it is a signatory, must live up to its commitments. It is also important to recall that there are also other grievances when it comes to Iran, and the list is long, including their military support to Russia, the human rights situation, and that includes arbitrarily detained EU citizens, many of us know examples by heart, and destabilising activities in the region for years that the EU continues to address with Iran. Honourable members, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to be also at the centre of EU concerns. And at the last Foreign Affairs Council, ministers were clear that the situation does need to change on the ground. And as tasked, the EU has since been concluding a humanitarian dialogue with Israel. And we're asking Israel concrete, precise and tangible changes in the way the humanitarian assistance is being delivered in Gaza. And the EU, of course, also acknowledges recent developments, including the reopening of the Kerem Shalom crossing in southern Gaza on May 19th, which allowed UN-manifested humanitarian trucks to enter, followed by the opening of the US West Sikkim crossing on June the 11th. In our view, these steps represent progress in facilitating the delivery of aid by humanitarian actors. However, also in our view, these remain insufficient to address the scale and severity of the humanitarian crisis that is going on within Gaza, due to a range of ongoing challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, minimum elements need to be in place to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches the people in need. And allow me to provide you with some examples. A total collapse, there's no other way to phrase it, the total collapse of humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip is imminent if fuel is not urgently allowed to enter. For humanitarian aid at scale, there's also the need to significantly increase the flow of trucks across border crossings equally in the north and in the south. Looting and self-distributions continue affecting most of humanitarian trucks, and this has to be addressed, along with ensuring the safety of humanitarian personnel. These are elements we're currently insisting on in our dialogue that we're carrying out with Israel. And Ministers of Foreign Affairs will revert to this situation in the Foreign Affairs Council of July and then decide on the way forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, at what I would call a truly critical juncture, we reaffirm our strong support once again to the security of all states in the region. And we urge all actors in the region to avoid any steps that could jeopardise the fragile calm and potentially lead to catastrophic consequences. I thank you very much, and I'm happy to see that the next commissioner is there. Grazie, signor.
Grazie, thank you so much. Diamo ora la parola ai colleghi.
I'd like now to open the debate. Mr. Gala, first of all.
Im Iran gesagt wurde, unterstreiche ich, brauche ich nicht zu wiederholen. Ich konzentriere.
Colleagues, I can only support what was said about Iran. I'll focus on Gaza. We do seem to be quite far along with the consensus. What we need is a ceasefire. The people in Gaza and the hostages have suffered long enough between the conflict between the Israel army and the terrorist Hamas, and the hostages are facing dreadful conditions. The living hostages must be freed. Hamas needs to stop using them as a bargaining chip, and this should be part of Israel's intentions. Then we need to have unfettered access for UN and the Red Cross. The Gazarian Foundation does not have access. They're struggling with the 600 trucks per day. Hamas must not have a future. Even before the 7th of October, they repressed the Gaza population and wanted to destroy Israel. And then it must be clear that the people in Gaza must have a future in Gaza. It was shocking to see how Trump and Netanyahu were chewing on steak and discussing the fate of the lives of these people. We can't have resettlement or deportation. We need a fair future without fear of violence for both peoples, which can only happen if we have a negotiated two-state solution. Thank you.
Prego.
Thank you. Mr. Maniatis.
My dear colleagues, if we have seen shown from the recent crisis in the Middle East is the weakness of the European Union to have a substantial role in the developments in a region of the highest geopolitical importance. This weakness was particularly obvious during the attacks in Iran. While the world around us changes, our strategy for the Middle East from the Commission has been postponed for the far future, let's say for the very far future. The Europe shouldn't be absent. We should assure that the transitional government in Syria will respect international law, human rights, and that all the religious and ethnic minorities will participate equally and securely in this new course. We should support the new government in Lebanon in the difficult task it has ahead. We should demand the immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, the stop of the blockades, free access for humanitarian aid, and the liberation of all hostages. It's unacceptable that the foreign ministers did not decide to suspend the association agreement between European Union and Israel in spite of the clear violations of human rights by Israel. Europe should act and should prove that Europe supports international law and human rights everywhere, not only in some cases. The peace talks that are taking place these days, we hope that will be a good first step in order to start the talks in the framework of the two-state solution to have a viable solution of peace in the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Stöttler.
Commissioner, this debate about the situation in the Middle East will likely be taken as yet another opportunity to bash Israel. But the situation is the Middle East has become a lot safer thanks to Israeli actions in response to the horrific and traumatic day of October 7th. The Middle East is dealing with dark terror forces of Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and so many other terror factions in the region. It was those Iranian proxies that started the war on October 7th, not the only true democracy in the Middle East that upholds our common interests and values. It is the state of Israel that is fighting for its people's survival. But yet, those dark forces, those terror groups, namely the Houthis, still find ways to make the world a more dangerous place. Just yesterday and today, the Houthis attacked commercial ships off the coast of Hudaydah, Yemen. Yesterday, they attacked Liberian-registered ship Magic Seas. Fortunately, the crew of 22 people could be saved. And then this morning, another merchant vessel was attacked by reportedly 5 rockets, sustaining severe damage and losing power. From what we know now, 2 crew members were injured and 2 of them are still missing. We hope they found safety and are well. Dear colleagues, this is the situation in the Middle East. The Islamic Republic of Iran, via the Houthis, via other proxies, attacking world trade, world order, and thereby seeking to destabilize the world and economy and security. We should support Israel and America in their efforts to putting things in order. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole Mularczyk.
Thank you. Mr. Mularczyk.
Od dekad słyszymy, że sytuacja na Bliskim Wschodzie jest na tyle skomplikowana i pełna niuansów, że osiągnięcie trwałego pokoju jest tam niemal niemożliwe. Polityka Donalda...
Thank you very much. There's a very nuanced situation in the Middle East, and we can hardly expect long-lasting peace. Trump's policy of might, of force, has dismantled our previous beliefs. We need to understand that the countries of the Middle East are subject to different rules from Western democracies. For the Ayatollahs of Iran, peace for them is a show of weakness, not of strength. And what shows that is the nuclear agreement which was concluded during the Obama administration. If we look ahead, the hope or the idea that one of the most authoritarian regimes in the world might have a weapon, that was very close thanks to the actions of von der Leyen, but now that has not proven to be the case. Thank you very much.
Ms. Walt.
Minister, Commissioner, colleagues, the European Union stands at a crossroad. The recent reports confirms what we can no longer ignore: grave violations of human rights by Israel, including attacks on hospitals, the blockade of humanitarian aid and forced displacement. Over 17,000 children have been killed in Gaza, according to UNICEF today. There is no doubt, colleagues, these acts breach Article 2 of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, and international courts have spoken. So if we fail to act now, we not only undermine our own laws, we erodate our global credibility. Therefore, I call for the immediate suspension of the Association Agreement. No trade, no cooperation, no impunity. This until the international law is upheld. Let us prove that our values are not for negotiation. And colleagues, if this is not happening, maybe we really should give a strong signal and not vote for the discharge of the Council in October. Thank you very much.
Minister, Commissioner, dear colleagues, the Iranian regime fuels terror at home and abroad, through executions, through proxies, through a nuclear program built for impunity. Hamas, one of its proxies, committed the horrific October 7 attacks. Netanyahu's government responded with brutal force in Gaza, blocking humanitarian aid, expanding illegal settlements in the West Bank. But what did Netanyahu's and Trump's bombs achieve? The centrifuges will spin again. The hate has deepened. This is not good versus evil. It is a tragedy of leaders abusing power and of people caught in between. Because Israel is also the protesters in the streets. Palestine is also the civilians trapped between occupation and Hamas. Iran is also the women who burn their hijabs and whisper Azadi. These people are not collateral to geopolitics. They are the path to peace. And if we center our foreign policy on them, on human dignity and international law, we can support their call for a lasting peace rooted in freedom for everyone. And because I was somehow just awarded 30 seconds, allow me to raise my frustration with the fact that Kaja Kallas is not here today to discuss this crucial topic for us here in the European Union and for the future of the region. And I would hope that she could be here with us a bit more often. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. I cannot see Ms. Boylan in the chamber, so I give the floor to Mr. Lopez Historis White. You have the floor.
Our last plenary session 3 weeks ago saw the launching by Israel of the Operation Rising Lion, aimed to contain Iran's nuclear threat. We have to recognize that 3 weeks later, Israeli citizens, Arab moderate people in the region, and us Europeans, we feel safer. Thank you to Israel and thank you for the United States for this, that we feel safer. Although the Europeans, we are a little bit hypocritical because we celebrate this in private but we don't do it in public. It was about time to end with this nuclear threat, not only to Israel, but also to ourselves, because, as I always have stated in this plenary, we are the next target. Make no mistake, the plans of the Ayatollahs to threaten and blackmail us are continuing. Terrorist organizations continue to plan how to destroy our democracies and our freedoms. We have, in this House, to be alert to this fact. The future of the Middle East is in the Abraham Accords. Against terrorism, theocratic regimes, working with the opposition, democratic opposition to these regimes, whatever is called Tehran or Caracas in Venezuela or Moscow in Russia. This is what has to unite us in our common struggle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Amor is next.
Thank you very much, President. So before our eyes, we see a European policy which seems to be characterized by this Chamberlain syndrome. In other words, one of appeasement and nothing else. Moral verticality as concerns Russia with Trump, Al-Sisi, Ayahu, Netanyahu, and so on and so forth. It's the only European policy that we have without any proper principles in place. Here we are sitting like an ostrich, like a turkey almost, just looking at Putin, and we see a situation which is totally unacceptable and catastrophe as far as foreign policy. Israel is a good example. The system of protecting human rights supposedly is resulting in destruction. It is resulting in humanitarian catastrophe and nothing less than that. It is creating hunger, destruction of schools, and this is the American policy which is in place right now. Now the question is not the agreement that we have with Israel. The question is, how can we sit by and watch young people, children, women, men dying? How are we going to deal with this situation? Like Chamberlain did, or like Churchill did in the past?
Thank you. Mr. Touch is next.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Isn't it great hearing socialists referring to Churchill? I can tell you a thing or two about that. I don't know whether you're aware that Prime Minister Netanyahu has made a proposal that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. He should have been given it in his first mandate with the Abraham Accords that transformed the Middle East even then and already showed the way that we could truly achieve peace and stability in the Middle East. Of course, Trump wasn't given it for ideological reasons. For ideological reasons, they would have given it to Obama, who was a warmonger disguised in a cloak of progressiveness. And so now we should be talking about giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Israel, transforming the Middle East to resist evil, resist the access of evil, and destroy it. There is no Hezbollah now. There is no Assad now. There is a huge weakness now at the heart of the Iranian terrorist network around the world. Iran is still there, hasn't fallen yet. But the Middle East now has a hope of peace as soon as they realize that Israel is here to stay. And we've taken a gigantic step in that direction. Israel is congratulating the West, and Israel is sacrificing the lives of its children, its soldiers, in a cruel war, and Israel does deserve that recognition.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ciccioli is next. Now, we need to be clear. The Middle East is not working. There's no way of the EU of discussing with them and then with us, the individual states, neither. There are historic roots there, and we know that people are trying to wipe out the state of Israel and the Jews, which is unacceptable. We can see these ideologies of hate and terrorism and strange sources of financing. The 7th of October showed the vulnerability of Israel, and the only response to terrorism has been what we've seen. This is the logic behind the attacks on the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah. So we know that without a solution there'll be no peace. We, as Europe, need to work with the United States. We need to recognise the right of Israel, and we know Israel has to respect the civilian population, but we have to find a solution. Either we find a solution there, or there's going to be more hate for the coming century.
Barry Andrews.
Thank you. Barry Andrews is next.
Thank you, Madam President, Minister, Commissioner and colleagues. Yesterday we bore witness to the very grotesque image of Benjamin Netanyahu presenting Donald Trump with his nomination papers for the Nobel Peace Prize. The words that come to mind are beyond parody, beyond ridicule, perversity, incomprehensible. Because on the same day, Israel Katz, the Minister for Defence, proposes that to move Gazans to an enclosed area in Rafah, perhaps satirically referred to as Humanitarian City. George Orwell could not have invented this kind of language. Described as well by Israeli academics and lawyers as, I quote, a blueprint for crimes against humanity, close quote. Eventually all Gazans will have to go there. Even the professor of Jewish history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Amos Goldberg, said the plan was for, and I quote, the creation of a concentration camp or a transit camp for Palestinians before they expel them. I think the one thing that we can agree on in this divided House is that the Nobel Committee in Oslo will not dwell too long in those nomination papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Søndal is next.
I'm going to speak in Danish.
I'm always surprised when I hear the far right talking about the pain on the Israelis, but can't understand the losses for the Palestinians in a situation where it becomes more and more desperate for the Palestinian people in Gaza, on the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Israeli bombardment are leaving Gaza in ruins. People without homes, without hospitals, without schools. It's a collective punishment of a whole people for the terrorist attack on the 7th of October. Israel is blocking everything: food, water, medicine, fuels, and in the few distributions there is, they are being shot at. People are going hungry, they are being killed, and we're just looking at it. And that's why the resistance against the war is growing in Europe and in Israel and everywhere, in order to get the fighting to stop and to get the hostages home. We have to make the Israeli government stop the bombardments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Botenga is next.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, Minister. You would have read the same headlines as me. Israel wants to have 600,000 Palestinians moved to a camp in Gaza. It's like 3 times the size of Charleroi, 3 times the size of Liège, in a camp. The ultimate objective, in the Israelis' words themselves, is to actually expel these immigrants, these Palestinians, from the Gaza Strip. Israel is now reopening the worst pages of European colonial history. Let us not forget, well before the horrors of the Second World War, colonial Spain had already established concentration camps in Cuba with hundreds of thousands of people dying from poverty and famine and illness. The UK had them in South Africa, the Germans in Namibia, and the French as well. So it's a concentration camp, and if that doesn't shake your support for Israel, then that is unacceptable. In the meantime, we've been fighting for human rights. We've been fighting against colonialism. But you stay faithful as partners to Israel, in fact privileged partnerships that some of you continue to defend. That's unacceptable today. Let us sanction Israel urgently.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Blaha.
Vážení kolegovia, s úctou hľadím na velikánov židovského pôvodu od Karla Marxa cez Rozu Luxemburgovú až po...
So when looks at the Jewish heritage of Karl Marx and Rosa Luxemburg, put that aside, and we have to make it quite clear that Israel is a country which is going to have to be dealt with in a very, very, very stiff fashion. Israel is conducting genocide right now. Children, women are being killed. Over the last 6 months, it's been clear what's been going on in Palestine. A record number of people have been killed in a very, very short period of time. And Washington is helping out. And von der Leyen seems to show as well even understanding for all of this, what's going on, what Israel is doing. But we have to say quite clearly that Rome, Berlin, and Tokyo were the axis of evil during the Second World War. Here we have a new axis between Washington, Tel Aviv, and it's quite clear that what we're seeing right now is the genocide of the 21st century. There are sanctions against Russia, but with regard to the Israelis, nothing is being said, not a single word. Nothing has been done.
Thank you.
Mr. Bulgaria.
Madam Commissioner. In December,
the peace envoy said, don't be surprised if we see an increase in tourism over the next few years. The Europol report said that there will be a security impact on the EU because of what's happening in Gaza. Europe is not looking to the Middle East, but the Middle East is looking to Europe. The tragedy in Gaza is a tragedy for those who are present in Gaza, and it is a tragedy for anyone who turns a blind eye to this. Respect for human rights is an essential element in the EU-Israel agreement. Firing on people who are seeking humanitarian assistance undermines, indeed, violates that agreement blatantly, and those deaths may well end up being considered war crimes. Any assessment of any agreement will be incomplete if it does not take account of that fact. We should rectify that.
By colleague Oliveira.
I do.
Please.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you. Mr. Bugalio, you referred to war crimes committed by Israel, where adults and children are being assassinated in cold blood when they're seeking food and humanitarian assistance. What more does the EU need to suspend the association agreement with Israel? What more do you need? What more assessment or external opinion or anything else do you need to point the finger of responsibility at those who are committing these horrors in Gaza and have been doing so for so long? What else do we need to end the association agreement? Dear fellow member, I assume you're addressing the European Commission rather than myself. I myself support the suspension of that agreement following a proposal made by Council to the Commission. So when I was referring to assessments, I was referring to that process, and I think it's taken too long already.
Ms. Insir is next.
Madam President, what was it? 1, 2, 3 hours ago, Thomas Tobé on behalf of the EPP was talking about the victims of communism. The only difference between us is that we never make difference between victims and victims. It should not be controversial to assert that killing, starving, mutilating and slaughtering children constitute a clear violation of international law. That is what is happening right now in Gaza, what the far-right government of Israel is doing against the children of Gaza. Make no mistake, history will judge each person that refused to act to end the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Hate is not the opposite of peace, apathy is. Apathy equals complicity. Those who don't want to be complicit to the genocide on the Palestinian people must demand suspension of the EU-Israeli Association Agreement now.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Tanjay Correa.
Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner. Muito bem. Não há dúvida.
There is no doubt that there are major changes afoot in the Middle East right now. Part of the circle of terror has been smashed. We're now going to see a transition that is ineluctable, and we're now going to see citizens at the helm. We're going to see change from within in Iran. And Hamas and Hezbollah, their useful idiots, are no longer going to have an Iran to support. It is a time of change, but it's not that straightforward. Syria is in a difficult situation too. That is not going to be easy to resolve during a period of transition, or even towards the end of that period. So we have to be very attentive, very vigilant. We have to look at human rights, as others have said. They are in danger. We have to look at the entire geopolitical landscape of the region. It's all changing, and it's going to be very difficult.
Do you accept a second, another blue card by colleague Oliveira?
Excuse me, Madam Chairman. No, because I was elected to the European Parliament, not to the Portuguese Parliament. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Giadi.
Once again, we're discussing the situation in the Middle East as it has developed after the Hamas terrorist act and, of course, the acts of Hezbollah and Houthis as well, which all ended up in the war between Israel and Iran. But I want to underline something. Although so many months have passed with deaths, violence, unfortunately, we see a negation, a total negation on the part of Hamas as far as cooperation and returning the hostages. In other words, they are fighting against their own people. What they wanted to do was they wanted to create retaliation, and that's what they did. And that retaliation has brought terrible consequences for the people of Palestine as well. The tolerance of countries that work together with terrorists, this is unacceptable. Tolerance leads to impunity, and impunity means fertile ground for terrorists. Take into consideration the strategic position of Cyprus. Those who forget that are leaving Europe totally uncovered and vulnerable.
Mr. Guetta. When Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that the Palestinians should have the capacity to govern themselves but not harm Israel, he's correct, except if that actually means, and there's every reason to fear that for him this actually means the Palestinians should not have a state of their own. This people will hope to find themselves in Jerusalem as their capital. They won't give up that dream, not even 10,000 years of waiting. And it's not peace that it's peace really that needs to prepare that path. So we need to have negotiations for peaceful coexistence between the two states. And this would allow them to have a level of security through this approach, because they have won. They can make this the last war if the Prime Minister finally can be convinced of this.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner.
Thank you. Mr. Satouri is next.
Gaza, la Palestine, le Moyen-Orient.
Gaza, Palestine and Middle East. For 21 months we've been discussing these places here. We've been talking about evidence of a genocide which is underway, evidence of apartheid, ethnic cleansing. We've identified all of that, but what have we done? I talk about starving children, destroyed hospitals, people being killed while bread is being handed out. I normally talk about all of that. Today I'd like to talk about us in Europe, a mirror of our impotence. Following Trump's interference, we're seeing attacks in these countries that are not allowing us to, in Greece, France, Italy, not arresting Netanyahu, not actually acting. We could have allies globally. We have international law on our side. We could stop Netanyahu and his murderous actions. We need to wake up. I say this to Ms. Kallas, I say this to my friends in the EPP. Wake up. Security and sovereignty are easy to say, but you can't have one without the other, and history will judge you.
Mr. Saidi is next.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam President. Shami, Noya, Kamela, Mansour, Milufa, Massour, Abed, Ahmad, and thousands of others. These are innocent civilian victims that we all deplore their loss regardless of their origins. They died in Israel at the hands of terrorists, assassinated while food was being handed out in Gaza. They've been targeted by the regime in Israel, in Tehran, where there's not real viable target and understanding of what they want to achieve by this. Their lives are worthy of our indignation. Madam Commissioner, I'm formally addressing you. Human rights are universal, but sometimes we see a level of hypocrisy and sometimes even complicity. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächstes spricht.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Yoncheva.
Dear President, dear colleagues, in the Middle East, the crisis is spreading fast from Palestine to Lebanon to Yemen and now to Iran. People need urgent help, but peace feels farther away than ever. This is already our sixth debate on the Middle East, since our new mandate began last July. And honestly, it feels like we keep saying the same things. We call for peace, we ask for actions, but very little changes. Each time we meet, the situation gets worse, and each time our words stay the same. We are stuck in helpless debate while the humanitarian help is so much needed while lives are lost. So I ask our High Representative, when will we finally see a real EU plan for peace? We need strategy. The European Union cannot just watch from the sidelines. You must do more, and we must do it now. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Es spricht jetzt.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pascual de la Parte is the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Middle East is enduring a change of geopolitics and of the geopolitical map. And one of the main elements for this change is to hold Iran accountable for its sponsorship of terrorism and destabilization across the region. We know that appeasement doesn't work with this regime, and we know as well that the direct military intervention is not advisable either. What will work will be international isolation based upon hardening of the sanctions against this criminal regime, as well as political and diplomatic pressure. At the same time, we have to recognize and support the democratic opposition of Iran, which will be the only one we will put an end to this regime. As far as Gaza is concerned, we reiterate our call for an unhindered access of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people, as well as a kind of future for them which has to be without Hamas. Hamas cannot be in the future political framework of the Palestinian, and to bet on the ceasefire immediately. Concerning my colleague Botenga from left, I must say that Spain never set up concentration camps in Cuba. He has to review his history books, because the communist regime of Fidel Castro and his followers, who has forced millions of Cubans out of his country and oppressed them and bring them misery and repression. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Do you accept the blue card by colleague Botenga? Please.
Thank you very much. I think you need to check your history, the Spanish colonial history and the fight with the United States. There were, at the end of the 19th century, concentration camps set up. But this is okay, you will check. Let me ask you a real question. Iran replied to an Israeli illegal attack by bombing Israel. Okay, it's easy to condemn Iran, as you have done time and time again. But over the last years, Israel has bombed, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Sudan, Yemen. Of course, Palestine is illegally occupying Palestine, parts of Syria, illegally occupying parts of Lebanon. Are you able to condemn this? Or do you say, no, I fully stand with Israeli violations of international law? Do you have these double standards, or do you adhere to international law?
Please.
Thank you, dear colleague, for your intervention. It's totally unbalanced and untrue. Spain, again, never set up concentration camps in the modern time in Cuba. I mean, the real oppressors of Cuba has been the communist regime under Fidel Castro and his successors, and you know that. Millions of Cubans have left the country because they cannot live in Cuba. These are the oppressors of Cuba and the communist regime that you represent. The second point, I have not said anything about Israel. I have said that Iran is the head of the monster which destabilized the entire region, and without this regime, probably we will live better, the region and ourselves, and you as well. Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Temido.
Thank you, President. The situation in the Middle East continues to reflect a disregard for international order and multilateralism. And it is also a symbol of our collective failure. In Lebanon, the terms of the ceasefire agreement are not being respected, and Israel has carried out new airstrikes. In Iran, US bombing has delayed the development of nuclear weapons, but has led to the suspension of cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and to the country's further isolation. And in Gaza, where more than 20 Israeli hostages remain in the hands of Hamas, the epicenter of the humanitarian tragedy continues. After 33 months of war, attacks on schools and hospitals, forced displacement and thousands of civilian deaths, people are dying of hunger every day. There are children hospitalized every day for malnutrition in the queues for humanitarian aid, now in the hands of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. 500 people have died and 4,000 have been injured in the struggle for food. That is why today we're once again echoing the voices of European citizens who are questioning the European institutions about the reasons for postponing the review of the association agreement. And we ask the foreign ministers of our member states, ministers, what position will you take when you discuss the suspension of the association agreement?
Thank you very much. Colleague Temido, would you accept?
Oliveira. It will, with all due respect, it will be the last one for you, if that's okay.
I was expecting this also, Madam President. Sra. Deputada Marta Temido.
Ms. Temido, in Gaza, Israel is using hunger as a weapon of war, and it is killing men, women and children who are seeking food. Israel is forcing refugees to leave refugee camps, and it's assassinating Palestinians with its policy. Genocide, ethnic cleansing, and the EU maintains an association agreement, continues providing EU funding for arms companies in Israel. That is a policy of complicity. And do you endorse that? Or do you believe that we should take firm action with Israel to end this genocide of the Palestinian people? Thank you very much for that question, Honourable Member. We are all concerned about the current situation, the people of Europe and the EU institutions.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Madam Latinopoulou. As long as the EU continues motionless in deep sleep, Islam is gaining ground and with greater confidence. One has to be totally blind, deluded, on drugs, actually, to not see the concerted attack on Christianity in the Middle East, orchestrated by Erdogan. In the beginning, it was World Heritage churches, for example, Saint Sophia and the Holy Monastery in the country that was forcibly turned into a mosque. Today, in Egypt, the Holy Monastery of St. Catherine on Mount Sinai, the oldest Christian temple in the world, has been targeted. Without shame, they're trying to steal the property of the monastery. Why? Because they have the nerve to be Christians. And in Syria, in the church of the prophet Elijah, dozens of worshippers were murdered. Ladies and gentlemen, the Islamists have declared war on Christianity. We must fight back. Severe sanctions against any state that attacks Christian elements have to be implemented. At the same time, we have to close illegal mosques in the EU and deport those Islamists who support Sharia law. We need an end of tolerance.
Thank you. An old Arab proverb says, "Listen more than you speak, for the ears are closer to the brain than the mouth." This wisdom is essential as we confront the complex realities of the Middle East today. We need to hear the United Arab Emirates, a persistent supporter of humanitarian aid in Gaza, a prosperous economy, and an inspiration of tolerance in the region. We must acknowledge Israel's right to self-defense and its legitimate security concerns in a region full of threats. We cannot ignore the grave danger that we all face when Iran openly pursues nuclear weapons with the explicit goal of wiping Israel off the map. We must stand with Middle Eastern Christian communities, many of whom face existential threats of genocide or cultural cleansing by extremists. And we must not forget the everyday Palestinians, people who seek to live in peace, not under the rule of a terrorist organization like Hamas. The Abraham Accords offer a concrete roadmap towards peace through truth and cooperation. Now is the time for the EU to listen with intent, to act with courage, and to be part of a path through peace, through prosperity for all in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Demirel.
Thank you, Madam President. 21 months of ethnic cleansing. While in Gaza you're seeing the rubble still smoking, it's not just bombs that are killing people, it's actually systematic famine. Those trying to get aid are being shot, they're being targeted. This is a policy of destruction, completely inhumane. This camp is meant to be humanitarian, but actually it's just a place to transport people. The idea is to wipe Palestine off the map. They want a greater Israel and are worsening the situation in the whole Middle East. In Germany, they're crocodile tears, but they're providing weapons. They're talking about using narratives that legitimize this, and Israel is actually doing our dirty work. The idea is that the whole objective of the new order in the Middle East is what they're talking about, but this order is being built on sand. Get your hands off the Middle East.
Thank
you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Lopatka.
Dear colleagues, I want to reiterate, when we talk about the Middle East, we have always have to remember the most significant threat in the region stems unmistakably from Iran and its network of proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. While Israel preemptive strikes disrupted Tehran's operational capacity, the Mullah regime, of course, will seek ways to continue destabilizing the whole neighborhood. And we saw it yesterday. The latest missiles were fired by the Houthis against Israel. And some weeks ago, Iran itself fired missiles on a major American base in Qatar. What we need is to push for diplomatic, political and economic initiatives to help to stabilize the region, like the European Commission is doing it with the negotiations to a free trade agreement with UAE. This is a good example how we should act as the European Union. But the real threat is the Iran.
Dankeschön. Da spricht nun die Kollegin Van Bremt.
Van Bremt, our next speaker. Thank you.
President, ladies and gentlemen, at least 1,000, that's the number of victims in Gaza since the 26th of June. The last time the Commission discussed this conflict. So thousands of lives, many of them women and children, thousands and thousands of lives which are still in the balance because of famine, because the Netanyahu regime is organising and orchestrating that famine. And there's a report being drawn up that's too late for us to bring pressure to bear to stop the association agreement, and nothing came of this. So a letter from the heads of state and government to ask them to allow humanitarian aid. And one day later, Netanyahu stopped the admission of aid in North Gaza. The lack of power from Europe is shameful. It's undefensible. How long, Commission, is this going to go on? Another 1,000 deaths, maybe 2,000?
Dankeschön. Als nächster spricht der Kollege.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Leggeri.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. President, Commissioner, 641 days now that Israeli hostages have been kept by Hamas. 641 days of waiting and suffering for them, and their families have been abandoned by the international community. Negotiations are foundering in Doha, and now we see an Islamic coalition, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, financed and armed by Iran, facing Israel. This is strategic, methodological, and it's Tehran's strategy to surround, weaken, and in the long term destroy the only stable democracy in the region. It is not a local conflict. It is a hybrid war, a regional war, and an ideological war. It is a war on the West. During this time, the EU has been trying to distribute humanitarian aid, but are giving it too often into the wrong hands, condemning violence without naming aggressors, saying that they were the victim of a pogrom in Israel on the 7th of October, and then telling them to hold firm. But combating Islamists and clearly condemning them is something they've not been brave enough to do. They've not been brave enough to see that this is a war of civilizations, and we should be on the side of democracy, firmness, and ultimately freedom. Thank you, President.
Danke. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege.
Thank you very much. Colleague Squarta is our next speaker.
Signor Presidente.
President, colleagues, the 7th of October was a horrific date. Israel was attacked, a bloody terrorist act, which an attempt to erase Israel from the map. But we cannot ignore what is going on right now. Children, women destroyed, mutilated, food distributed as if it was some sort of luxury good. Totally unacceptable situation, and I think the moral voice of Europe ought to be raised at this point. We have to suspend immediately these particular bombardments, and Hamas must release the hostages. Innocent lives have to be saved, and the two sides ought to be able to live in dignity without fear, and it is only there that mothers, Israeli and Palestinian mothers, will be able to have any hope whatsoever for their children in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, Every day in Gaza and across Palestine, people are injured, killed, displaced. Land is stolen, humanity denied, life suppressed. How did we get to this point? And what is our responsibility? This is not just a matter of international politics. It is also a matter of political economy, of capital, greed and profit. Private corporations actively fuel and profit from the Zionist settler colonial project, the occupation and the ongoing genocide. This is the key message of the latest UN report by Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. A powerful capitalistic machine of profit is feeding destruction. Arms manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, Leonardo and Thales supply the weapons and fuel military escalation. Tech giants such as Google, Amazon and Meta enable mass surveillance and repression with no ethical restraint. Construction and machinery firms like Caterpillar and Volvo deliver the bulldozers that demolish Palestinian homes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a coordinated system of profit. This is racial colonial capitalism. Genocide continues because it is profitable. But we have a duty. The European Union must suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement now.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Teodorescu Moave.
Fru talman. Thank you, Madam President. At this very moment, decisive talks are taking place about a possible ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The liberation of the hostages that Hamas have held for over 600 days must constitute our highest priority. If we want to avoid another 7th of October, then Hamas, whose goal is not peace, but Israel's eradication, must be conquered militarily and ideologically. The Palestinian people deserve better than a life under a brutal terrorist regime. Despite the risk to their own lives, many courageous Gazans have protested against the oppression from Hamas, and these are the voices that we should support. A lasting peace requires two states, but only if both states recognise each other's right to exist. The prerequisites for peace do not start with a ceasefire. They start with the will to coexist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Annunziata.
Thank you, Madam President, cari colleghi.
Colleagues, now together, as looking at the proposal of Trump as a noble candidate, and particularly with regard to the peace project that has been put together by the White House and references to the displacement of Palestinian people in peace and the transfer of these individuals, it has to be clear that what's the point here is that the Palestinian state will fall into the hands of the Israelis. What is the result of this? What is this? There is no possibility of having some sort of lasting peace under these particular circumstances. This particular U.S. strategy, beginning in the 1990s, has been based on a series of failures which involve regime change and nothing else. Because we have to understand that these particular approaches cannot be successful under any circumstances whatsoever. 500,000 men in Iraq tried to implement regime change, and of course there is no way that 80 million Shiites will be able to be subject to any sort of regime change by a small Israeli contingent. That is something totally unrealistic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the world irrevocably changed on September 11, so the terrorist attack of Hamas against Israel on October 7, 2023 has started a chain of events which changed relations on the Middle East. Netanyahu is fostering conflict to transform Israel by establishing domain over a wider area. it is reckoning not only with Hamas terrorists, but with the entire Palestinian people. At the same time, internal repression in Iran has grown after the external intervention, and this has brought the regime to the brink of the abyss. But can the EU move away from its concerns over the situation in the Middle East because it was not able to agree on a common stance? The European Union, as a soft power, cannot obviously mediate in a hard power conflict. The EU is considering available measures, including the suspension of the Agreement on Stabilization and Accession between the EU and Israel. The Middle East is at a critical crossroads, which requires more decisive action. Our role in achieving the JCPOA shows that the EU, when united, can achieve important global diplomatic successes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Reuten.
President, I stand here rather desperate, to be honest, especially also listening to the Commission and the Council. But let's try one more time to find unity on one point, on humanitarian values, empathy and respect for lives of innocent people. We here should, as a minimum, agree to the need to open Gaza, immediate and unrestricted access of humanitarian aid, food and medical supplies into Gaza by independent, international, respected organizations. This Parliament, it seems, and for sure a large majority of our citizens, wants this. Our citizens have lost respect for Europe's inaction over Gaza and Europe's double standards. There are no excuses. After all the well-documented violations of international law, the lack of recommendation to suspend all or part of the agreement is a violation of the Commission's role as guardian of the treaties, and the HRVP knows that. And equally, the Council's lack of action is inexplicable and undermines protection of rules-based international order. We should find the political resolve to ensure that Europe acts now to open Gaza. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächster spricht die Kollegin Riedel.
Our next speaker is colleague Riedel.
Chers collègues, parfois...
Dear colleagues, I do sometimes wonder what world we're living in. Benjamin Netanyahu is calling on Trump to be given the Nobel Peace Prize, while Trump is talking about a forced displacement still for Palestinians outside Gaza, thirst, starvation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation trying to give out food and assistance, 613 people killed. Israeli soldiers speaking out about the horrors of war, feeling betrayed by Netanyahu. We hear them say, I am ashamed of this war, ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu is seized by the desire for reprisals, and even now he's refused for a Palestinian state to be created and for Israel to withdraw from the Gaza Strip over time. This is complicity with war criminals, and we should suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement to show that we do defend a two-state solution, people living side by side in freedom and security.
Our next speaker is colleague Nemetz.
Dear colleagues, people in Gaza and in the Middle East are still being killed every day, in hospitals, in refugee centres and in the lines for humanitarian aid. We may have narrowly avoided the escalation last month in Israel-Iran conflict into a full-scale war, but the region remains far from peace. The people are still suffering with very little hope. A ceasefire must be achieved now. The review of the EU-Israel Association Agreement confirmed violation of Article 2. Next week, the EU foreign ministers must urgently come to a decision on concrete measures. Suspend the agreement, sanction those responsible for war crimes, stop trade with illegal West Bank settlements, impose an arms embargo on Israel, ban Israel accessing EU funds and programmes, and protect the international law and institutions. Europe must act now. If not, EU leadership and institutions, including our foreign ministers, will be criminally responsible for their complicity under international law, not in our name. Thank you.
Dear colleague Nemetz, do you accept the blue card? No. Okay. Then the next speaker is colleague O'Riordan.
do spoil any more.
First of all, High Representative Kallas should apologise for what she recently said about the history of Ireland. She said that our experience is not the same as various states in the East, those that lost their culture and their languages. She should study the history of Ireland a little and question why English is spoken in Ireland and why there are millions of people with Irish surnames all over the world as a result of violence, poverty and hunger.
Such as many others, we know what it means to have your language, your culture and your very identity suppressed. We know what it means to live under occupation, to have foreign powers dictate your fate. This is why we have a deep sense of solidarity with Palestinian people and why we stand here calling for action from the EU. When EU ministers meet on July 15th, we must scrap the EU-Israel Association Agreement and we must sanction Israel now. Saoirse from Palestine.
Freedom for Palestine.
Dankeschön. Und nun für die Left Group.
And now, colleague Boylan from the left.
We're now at a point where gunning down hungry people as they desperately try to get aid is a daily occurrence. There was international shock the first time, but just like with the bombing of the first hospital, when there are no consequences for Israel, they are emboldened and they carry on. 700 Palestinians have now been slaughtered at aid sites. Baby formula is blocked. They are literally starving babies to death and still the EU does not act. In fact, instead of holding Israel to account, President von der Leyen has Netanyahu, a war criminal, on speed dial, and she's actively encouraging him to carry out illegal strikes on Iran. There is more outrage from EU leaders about artists calling out a genocide than there is against those who are actually carrying out that genocide. Solidarity with Palestine is being criminalised and the EU is sacrificing its civil liberties to support Israel. But Palestinian solidarity grows stronger every day. The people won't be silenced. The people are demanding suspension of trade with Israel. The people are demanding sanctions against Israel. The people are demanding an end to their complicity with Israel's war crime and its genocide, and they are demanding that their EU leaders act and listen to them.
Dankeschön. Wir kommen zum Catch the Eye.
Now we come to the Catch the Eye. We have 8 individuals who have expressed a desire, and we'll begin with Jean-Marc Germain, and a colleague Tüngenen can get prepared.
Madam President, colleagues, the Israel-Iran ceasefire is a relief, but we should not take our eyes off the Middle East. Look at what's happening in Gaza with civilian deaths. It must stop. Destruction must stop. Netanyahu's war must stop. We need peace. Commissioner, the EU's silence, the EU institutions' silence must stop. Bloody repression in Iran following the conflict. 3 opposition activists have been hanged. There's a French citizen of 18 years disappeared, possibly taken hostage. There are 20 or so European hostages currently in detention, and the situation has got worse. I was talking to the families yesterday and the day before, talking to the families of 2 prisoners who are being kept in inhumane circumstances. Their location is unknown. There's psychological threat over them of the death penalty. Amnesty International is also saying that there is a risk of imminent execution of the Swedish national being held with them. So I call on the EU executive to use all possible levers to achieve the immediate release of European hostages in Iran.
Next speaker is colleague Tüngenen. Thereafter, colleague Asensiotra.
Madam President, what would a better version of the Middle East look like? Hezbollah that is a shadow of itself. The Assad regime gone. Iran severely weakened. This is already a reality. For the first time in a long time, there is genuine hope. What else we would need for a better future for the Middle East is the end of Hamas. The EU must be careful to not undermine this goal. Israel is aiming for peace through strength. We cannot be pushing for a Palestinian state until the terrorist entity is removed from power. Recognizing a Palestinian state now would be an endorsement of terror. The intentions might be good, but the result will be catastrophic. Instead, we must demand that Hamas disarms, releases the hostages and surrenders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Asensio is next. Ms. Montero will be after that.
President, within a couple of years, the new generations are going to ask those of the future, what have you done? What was done when a genocide was taking place in Gaza? And I know what I'd say, Madam von der Leyen, Madam Kallas, you were kind of on the periphery. Although the International Court of Justice issued decisions concerning this, you remained on the side, leaving no mark whatsoever. And the 70,000 people, more than that have died in Gaza, they can't get up and point at you, but you and other governments continue to provide arms for this machine of annihilation, of genocide and destruction, that of Netanyahu as well. And we saw what happened with the flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla. We are not going to stop. We're not going to stop until those who are responsible are held accountable at this terrible moment. Thank you.
Ms. Montero is next, and then Mr. Julis after.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, Madam President. Israel is continuing with its extermination plan, and just like the Nazis, it is imposing its final solution on Palestine. On the ruins of Gaza, it wants to build a concentration camp. It was called a ghetto in Warsaw. It was what the Nazis were doing. There are legal implications here. There are treaties on arms trading. We should not be selling arms to those engaging in genocide. We should not have trade relations or investment in Israel. There are legal rulings to that effect. So why are EU countries still buying and selling arms with Israel? Why are we still trading with companies who are supporting the illegal occupation of Palestine and genocide? Now, alongside the US in NATO, the main Netanyahu client, launching attacks on Iran. Together, these are the main threats to peace and security in the world. Rearmament is complicity with genocide, ladies and gentlemen. The Spanish rearmament plan includes buying Israeli military equipment. We should comply with international legal rules. But what you're doing is being complicit in genocide, which converts you into criminals.
If I've understood what you just said, you're accusing people of being criminals. I'm going to have to pass that on to be checked. We have to show respect with each other in the chamber. Mr. Gajoulis is next. Mr. Estrada is after that. Dear members of the European Parliament, I wonder every day, and I would like to put the same question to you, who in the world decided that there are countries that are entitled to have nuclear weapons and the others are not entitled to have it? Iran is being bombed for pursuing that program, but according to Iran, this is an uranium enrichment project for peaceful purposes. According to Israel, Iran is the threat. We're not bombing Russia or China. Are they democratic countries? No. but those countries are entitled to have a nuclear weapon. Who has decided that? If Ukraine didn't give up on its nuclear program, the Budapest Protocol never would have been signed and Russia would never have attacked them. Thank you very much. Zgłosiewska's after.
Anch'io volevo fare un paio di precisazioni, una per I colleghi deputati.
So two clarifications. First of all, of course, I am concerned about the issue of the nuclear program in Iran, but let's not forget that we have also on the other side Israel, which has not signed the non-proliferation treaty. There are no inspectors going there. So I think indeed everything has to be done so that the issue not only concerning Gaza and the West Bank as well, that everything be done in order to allow for assistance to be provided and of course for the necessary controls to be conducted. We're speaking about behavior. We're speaking about international law. Indeed, we cannot cooperate with a country that is violating international law, and indeed, criminals are at foot here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Zgłosiewska, and then Nina Path.
Mówiąc o sytuacji na Bliskim Wschodzie, nie sposób nie wspomnieć o losie chrześcijan, bo to oni są dziś jedną z najbardziej prześladowanych.
East, we're also talking about persecution of Christians, one of the most persecuted groups in the world. In Egypt and in other countries, there are brutal attacks on churches. They're burnt down. Priests are assassinated or abducted. Churchgoers who refuse to give up their faith are assaulted. We're seeing attacks in Alexandria. In Egypt, there were deaths recently. At a time of a church ceremony, there was a bus with 33 mortalities, a bus attack with 33 mortalities. The Christian community was deprived of a monastery. This is systematic, planned terrorism. There are terrifying figures here. There's one Christian dying around the world every 6 minutes, and the Middle East is one of the most dangerous areas for Christians. If we believe in human rights in Europe, then we must protect Christians and speak out against this, not become accomplices.
Ms. Miranda Paz.
Gracias, Presidenta. Huele a sangre.
Thank you. I smell blood and death. But above all, I smell hypocrisy. Building a city on the ruins of Rafah in Gaza. This is the latest thing that Netanyahu has come up with. Yet another dimension to this genocide. What more do we need? What more evidence of genocide do we need? Ms. Kallas is not here today, but how can the UN humanitarian aid system that Trump and Netanyahu want to turn into a business? There's a Trump and Netanyahu business going on here to transfer humanitarian aid, destroy the UN system, and destroy UNRWA. This is what Ms. Albanese is saying. Don't take my word for it. 33 months of genocide, starvation, and repression. All we need to do is comply with international law. Comply with what the International Criminal Court has said. Sanctions and the end of the agreement. The Council is here too. I say to Council, take measures on the 15th of July. The Council of the European Union and the Commission cannot continue being accomplices to this.
Thank you very much. Now for the Commission, Commissioner Roosevelt.
Madam President, honourable members, the European Union will continue actively to contribute to all diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalating tensions and achieving a lasting solution. We stand ready to engage constructively with Iran, remaining firm in our expectation and united in our resolve. A sustainable and credible resolution to the Iranian nuclear issue is only possible through a comprehensive, verifiable and durable agreement. We are also committed to find ways to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And together with the Foreign Affairs Ministers, we will assess the way forward at the next Foreign Affairs Council on the 15th of July. With that, I thank you very much for the debate.
Dankeschön. Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Council, Minister Bjerre.
President, honourable members, Commissioner, the European Union reaffirms its commitment to regional peace and stability. We urged continued restraint and adherence to international law, and we renew our commitment to all diplomatic efforts to bring about a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. We will do so in coordination with our international partners, as we have recently done in the context of the G7. Your interventions today were clear about the need to bring an end to the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza as a matter of urgency. In order to do so, the European Union will continue to support the efforts of the mediators to reach a sustainable ceasefire. Furthermore, you can rest assured that the Council will follow up on the reviews of Israel's compliance with Article 2 of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. The matter will be on the agenda of the next Foreign Affairs Council next week. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Die Aussprache.
Thank you very much. That brings the debate to a close. I have some announcements. The SM Group has informed the Presidency about changes in composition of committees and delegations. They've been noted in the minutes and they will come into effect tomorrow. The Inter Committee has put forward a recommendation not to raise an objection on the announcement made on the 7th of July. There was no objection raised. That means, pursuant to our rules, it will be deemed approved and will be published for the other texts. And finally, pursuant to Rule 251, Para 4 of the Rules of Procedure, I'd like to tell you that there's a core addendum from the Monday, the 7th of July, an announcement. There wasn't a request for a vote on that, so the core addendum will be confirmed and will be published on the Parliament's website. That brings us on to the next item on the agenda, statements by the Commission and Council on the situation in Belarus, in particular the release of political prisoners. First of all, on this, I'd like to give the floor to Minister Bjerre once more.
President, honourable members, commissioners, let me start by my intervention